a bowl of noodles in China, a plate of pasta in Italy, a chapati in India, a sandwich in New York. The foods look completely different. They belong to different cultures, different cuisines, and different histories. But underneath all of them is the same ancient grass. Wheat. Today, wheat feels ordinary. It sits in bread, biscuits, cakes, pasta, noodles, breakfast cereals, and thousands of processed foods. But for most of human existence, none of those foods existed. Neither did farms. Neither did permanent villages. Neither did cities, governments, written laws, organized armies, or empires. Humans survived by moving through the landscape, hunting animals, and gathering whatever edible plants they could find. Then, thousands of years ago, something changed. People living in the ancient Middle East began deliberately planting wild grasses. Among them was wheat. It sounds like a small agricultural experiment. It wasn't. Because once humans learned how to produce wheat reliably, they could produce something hunter-gatherers had always struggled to obtain: a large amount of food that could be stored for months or even years. That changed the rules of human survival. The story begins in the Fertile Crescent, a region stretching across parts of the modern Middle East. Wild ancestors of wheat grew naturally there. For hunter-gatherers, these grasses were simply another seasonal food. People collected their seeds, crushed them between stones, and ate them as rough meals or porridges. But harvesting wild wheat was frustrating. Wild plants evolved to spread their seeds. When their grain became mature, the seed heads naturally shattered, scattering their contents across the ground.
Must be careful.
That was excellent for the plant. It was terrible for the human trying to collect it. Then people began changing wheat without understanding genetics. Whenever they encountered plants whose seeds remained attached longer, those plants were easier to harvest. Those were the seeds humans were more likely to collect, and some of those seeds were eventually planted again. Generation after generation, people unintentionally selected wheat that was increasingly useful to humans. The plant changed, but humans were changing too. Instead of traveling to find food, communities increasingly stayed near the places where food could be grown. They cleared land. They planted. They waited. They harvested. And for perhaps the first time, the future of an entire community depended on what happened in a field. Agriculture gave humans something extraordinary: control, or at least the appearance of it. A successful wheat harvest could produce far more calories from a piece of land than simply searching the surrounding countryside for wild plants. But there was a catch. Farmers had to stay. A hunter could follow migrating animals. A farmer could not carry a wheat field. People became tied to land, seasons, and rainfall. They built houses because they expected to remain. They constructed storage facilities because grain could survive long after harvest. They protected those stores because stored food was valuable. And gradually, settlements became larger. Once a community could produce more grain than it immediately consumed, something revolutionary became possible: surplus. That surplus could feed people who were not farmers: builders, potters, metalworkers, merchants, priests, soldiers, administrators, kings. The civilization sitting above the farmer became possible because somebody below it produced more food than their own family needed. Wheat was becoming infrastructure Once societies accumulated grain, rulers discovered something important. Grain could be counted. It could be measured. It could be stored. It could be transported. And most importantly, it could be taxed. A government cannot easily collect a percentage of someone's dinner after it has been eaten. But sacks of wheat sitting inside a granary are different. Officials could measure harvests and demand a portion. That grain could then feed workers building monuments. It could support priests and administrators. It could provision soldiers. It could be redistributed during shortages. Agriculture had produced more than food. It had produced a taxable form of energy. And whoever controlled that energy could exercise enormous political power. The granary became almost as important as the palace. Because a king with gold but no grain had a problem. A king with grain could feed an army.
As wheat agriculture spread, humans discovered increasingly sophisticated ways of transforming grain. Grinding wheat into flour made it easier to eat. Mixing flour with water created dough. Heating that dough produced bread. Then fermentation transformed bread again. Wild yeast could fill dough with gas, creating something lighter and softer than the dense flatbreads people had eaten before. Bread became one of civilization's great food technologies. It was portable. It was calorie-dense. It could be divided into portions, and its raw ingredient could be stored for long periods before being baked. For workers and soldiers, that combination was incredibly useful. Civilizations could now convert fields of grass into portable human energy. Wheat entered the machinery of empire.
Few civilizations understood the political importance of grain better than Rome. At its height, Rome became one of the largest cities the ancient world had ever seen. But enormous cities create enormous problems. Hundreds of thousands of people concentrated in one place cannot simply walk outside the city walls and find enough food. Rome required a gigantic agricultural supply system. Grain arrived from territories across the Mediterranean world. Ships carried enormous quantities towards the capital. Ports, warehouses, and distribution systems existed to keep the population supplied. Food had become geopolitics. Control a productive agricultural region, and you did not merely gain territory. You gained calories. Calories supported people. People supported armies. Armies protected empires. The relationship between wheat and political stability became impossible to ignore. When grain was abundant, rulers could keep cities fed. When grain became scarce, prices rose. And hungry populations were dangerous. A government might survive criticism. It might survive corruption. It might even survive military defeat. But governments throughout history have discovered that surviving an empty stomach is much harder. Wheat conquers new continents. Empires, merchants, and migrants carried wheat far beyond its original homeland. It spread through Europe and across parts of Asia and Africa. Centuries later, European colonization carried wheat into the Americas, Australia, and other regions where large-scale production eventually flourished. Where climates were suitable, wheat followed settlers. Fields replaced grasslands. Mills appeared. Bakeries followed. Railways eventually connected farms to cities and ports. A crop first domesticated thousands of years earlier became part of a global commodity system. And then industrialization changed it again. The machine that changed: bread. For most of history, growing wheat required enormous amounts of human and animal labor. Fields had to be prepared, seeds planted, crops harvested, grain separated. Flour ground, bread baked. Mechanization began attacking those steps one by one. Agricultural machinery allowed fewer workers to cultivate larger areas. Railways moved grain farther and faster. Steam-powered and industrial mills processed enormous quantities of wheat into flour. Modern storage and transportation networks allowed grain harvested in one part of the world to feed people thousands of kilometers away. Wheat stopped being merely a local crop. It became a global system. A failed harvest in one region could increasingly be compensated for with grain from somewhere else. But globalization created another reality. Countries could become dependent on wheat. They did not grow themselves. The grain that created food security could also create vulnerability. By the 20th century, humanity faced a familiar problem on an unprecedented scale. Population was exploding. More people meant more food. But there was only so much agricultural land. Scientists therefore began trying to produce more wheat from the same
Grain
fields.
heads are fully formed.
Plant breeders developed shorter, higher-yielding varieties that could respond strongly to fertilizer without collapsing under the weight of their own grain. Combined with irrigation, fertilizers, pesticides, and improved farming techniques, these varieties dramatically increased wheat production in many countries. This became a major part of the Green Revolution. The consequences were enormous. Regions facing severe fears of food shortages increased agricultural output dramatically. Countries such as India transformed their wheat production. The basic equation of agriculture changed. More grain could be produced from the same hectare. Humanity had once domesticated wheat. Now science was redesigning it. Today, wheat travels through a supply chain that would be almost incomprehensible to the first farmers who cultivated its ancestors. Seeds developed by breeders are planted by machines. Combine harvesters cut enormous fields. Grain moves into silos. From there, it travels by truck, train, and ship. Mills transform it into flour. Factories turn that flour into thousands of products. And somewhere at the end of that enormous system, somebody buys a loaf of bread without thinking about any of it. That invisibility is the final stage of wheat's success. Something becomes truly fundamental when people stop noticing it. But dependence has consequences. Drought can reduce harvests. Extreme heat can damage crops. War can disrupt production. Ports can close. Fertilizer prices can rise. Trade routes can be interrupted. And because wheat is traded globally, a crisis thousands of kilometers away can eventually change the price of bread.
It's gone up again.
In a country that never saw the conflict. The ancient connection between grain and political stability never disappeared. It simply became global. Civilization is still waiting for the harvest. That is the strange thing about wheat. Human technology has changed beyond recognition. We built skyscrapers, split the atom, landed on the moon, connected billions of people through the internet. And yet, one of civilization's most important questions remains almost identical to the question facing farmers thousands of years ago. Will there be enough grain after the next harvest? Because beneath all the technology of modern civilization is a biological reality we cannot escape. Humans need calories every single day. Wheat helped us solve that problem well enough to build permanent settlements. Those settlements became cities. Cities created governments. Governments built armies. Armies created empires. Empires spread wheat farther. And eventually, the grain became part of a global food system supporting billions of people. So the history of wheat is not really the history of bread. It is the history of what happened when humans stopped searching for food and began trying to control it. We domesticated wheat. But in doing so, wheat changed where we lived, how we worked, how governments collected wealth, how armies were fed, and how civilizations survived. Thousands of years later, after everything humanity has invented, we are still depending on the descendants of that ancient grass, one harvest at a time.